Ladies and gentlemen, imagine being at the very edge, not of a cliff, but of a moment, the kind of moment that tests the very fiber of who you are. You've done all you can. You've prayed, you've cried, you've waited. The silence of heaven feels louder than the noise of the world around you. You're not bitter, you're just tired of hoping, tired of holding on. And then there it is, this thought, quiet but strong. What if I just waited a little longer? She was in that exact place. And I want you to hear me clearly. She didn't see angels descend. She didn't feel some supernatural burst of strength. No, she simply made a decision. One that seemed small, trivial even, but would change everything. She decided to wait just one more hour. Now I know what you're thinking. 1 hour? That's nothing. 60 minutes, 3,600 seconds. It's not a lifetime. It's not even a day. But friend, that 1 hour became the hinge on which everything turned, because it wasn't just time she was giving, it was trust. We talk a lot about faith as if it's this giant unshakable force. But sometimes faith is just staying still when you want to run. It's choosing to wait when everything in you is screaming, move on, give up, let go. Patience isn't the absence of struggle. It's often the arena where the greatest battles are fought. In that hour, nothing changed on the outside. The sky didn't split, the pain didn't lift, but something began to shift inside her. Because patience isn't passive, it's not idle. True patience is active, it's defiant, it's a declaration that says, I will not be moved, not because I have the strength, but because I believe the one I'm waiting on is faithful. You see, we live in a culture of speed, fast food, fast internet, fast answers. We are conditioned to believe that if something doesn't happen immediately, it's not worth it, or worse, it's not going to happen at all. But God doesn't operate on our clocks. His ways are not our ways, and His timing, His timing is perfect, not convenient, not comfortable, but perfect. That 1 hour of waiting became the proving ground of her faith. It wasn't about what she received at the end of it, it was about who she became in it. Because sometimes the real change isn't the outcome, it's the transformation that happens while we wait. You might be sitting there thinking, but I've waited more than an hour. I've waited years, decades, and I hear you. I do. I'm not here to romanticize waiting or to suggest it's easy. It's not. It can be agonizing. It can feel like death. But listen to me, if your waiting is rooted in the promises of God, it's not wasted, not 1 second of it. You want to talk about power? The world looks for power in noise, in control, in movement. But the power of God often shows up in the stillness, in the refusal to bow to fear, in the silent, stubborn holding on. The woman who waited an hour didn't know what would come, but that didn't stop her from trusting. And that trust, that fragile, trembling trust, it moved heaven. Now let me say something hard. Most people don't wait because they don't believe it's worth it. Deep down, they've been trained to think that if nothing happens quickly, then nothing is happening at all. But faith says, even when I see nothing, I believe something. Even when the answer delays, faith holds on because it knows who it's holding on to. So why is that hour so important? Why did it matter? Because God uses the waiting to strip us of self-reliance, to silence the noise of our own plans, to empty us of everything but Him. And in that place where it's just you, your weakness, and His promises, you finally realize His grace is sufficient. His strength is made perfect in your waiting. Some of you are in that very hour right now. You're right on the edge. You're saying, Lord, I've waited as long as I can. And I want to tell you something, not as someone far away, but as someone who's been there in the silence. Wait a little longer. Not because the wait itself is magical, but because God is faithful, because He's working while you're waiting, because in the unseen, He is shaping something eternal. What if she had given up at minute 59? What if she had said, this is pointless, and walked away at the edge of breakthrough. I'm telling you, your faith is not in vain. Your patience is not unnoticed. The God who sees in secret will reward you openly. Maybe not in the way you expected, maybe not in the timing you wanted, but in the way that will leave you knowing it was always worth it. So wait, just one more hour. I wonder if we understand just how powerful a single decision can be. We often look for transformation in the grand gestures, the loud moments, the miracles that shake the earth. But more often than not, real change, lasting, soul-deep change, starts with a whisper of a choice, one decision, one turning point, one deliberate act of faith when nothing around you suggests it's the right thing to do. She made one such decision. She chose to wait just one more hour. Now let's not romanticize it. She wasn't glowing with confidence. She wasn't feeling triumphant. In fact, she was closer to giving up than she had ever been before. Her heart was worn, her faith bruised, her prayers seemingly unanswered, echoed like silence through the chambers of her soul. But in that moment, right there in her weakness, she made a decision that would alter everything that followed. Don't miss this. The decision didn't come with a guarantee. That's what makes it so powerful. She wasn't waiting because she knew exactly what would happen. She was waiting because she believed in who she was waiting for. That's what makes a single decision matter. It's not just about what you do, but why you do it. You see, every decision we make is a seed. Some are small, almost invisible. You won't feel the weight of them when you make them. But over time, those seeds grow. They shape the course of your life. The decision to stay, the decision to forgive, the decision to pray again, even when you feel numb inside. These aren't dramatic actions, but they carry the weight of eternity. She chose to wait, and that one decision became a doorway, a moment that heaven would use to shift the atmosphere. Because decisions made in faith, even when they're made in fear, have a way of unlocking things far beyond our understanding. You've got to understand something about God. He doesn't need much to work with. He doesn't require you to be full of confidence or overflowing with peace. He asks for trust, that mustard seed, that smallest choice to say, Lord, I don't see it, I don't feel it, but I choose you anyway. That's what and something began to move, not just around her, but in her, because one of the most profound truths you'll ever learn is this: we are shaped by the decisions we make when it's hardest to believe. When we look back on our lives, the defining moments are rarely the loud ones. It's not always the promotions, or the miracles, or the applause. Often it's the quiet personal moments, where we decided to keep walking when we wanted to sit down, to hold on when everything told us to let go. One decision. That's what it took for the woman at the well to walk into her calling. That's what it took for the thief on the cross to step into paradise. That's what it took for the prodigal son to turn his face toward home. One decision. You might be one decision away from seeing everything differently, not because your circumstances change, but because your heart does. Sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the healing or the provision. It's the transformation of perspective that comes from a single surrendered choice. And listen to me, the enemy knows this. That's why he fights your decision making more than anything else. He doesn't always have to wreck your life. Sometimes all he has to do is paralyze your will, keep you second guessing, keep you afraid to act, keep you sitting on the edge of obedience, convincing yourself that now isn't the time. But faith doesn't wait for perfect timing. Faith acts, faith decides, faith steps into the unknown, not because it sees the whole path, but because it trusts the one who does. That's what she did, and in doing so, she gave God something to work with. You see, God honors obedience. He honors the decision made in quiet faith. He steps into the story when you choose Him over fear, Him over doubt, Him over what you can see. It wasn't about the hour. It wasn't about the length of time. It was about the choice. She waited. And in that waiting, she declared something louder than any sermon. She said, my trust is not in the clock, it's in my King. You're not stuck, you're not forgotten, you're not without options. You are one decision away from God doing something new in you. Don't underestimate the moment you're in. Don't despise the small choice. Eternity often hangs on what we choose in the middle of the quiet. So choose to stay, choose to believe, choose to forgive again, to worship again, to get up one more time. Choose the narrow way, choose the hard way, choose to trust when there's nothing left to hold on to but the promise that God is who He says He is. That's where she was, and everything changed, not just because of what happened at the end of the hour, but because of the decision she made at the beginning of. She didn't know how it would unfold. She didn't have a blueprint. No angel whispered a timeline in her ear. No sign appeared in the sky to tell her, hold on, only 3-4 more minutes and your miracle is coming. All she had was a quiet sense buried deep within her spirit that she was supposed to wait just one more hour. And in that waiting, everything changed, but not in the way most people expect. See, when we talk about change, when we dream about it, pray for it, we usually imagine something dramatic, something instant. A complete turnaround, a healing, a breakthrough, a phone call, a miracle that silences our pain and answers every question. But that's not how it always works. That's not how it worked for her. Nothing on the outside seemed to shift. The circumstances didn't bend to her hope immediately. The sky didn't clear. The ache didn't disappear. And yet something was moving quietly, invisible. Change had already begun to take root. But it wasn't what she expected, and it didn't come when she thought it should. Because real change, God's kind of change, often comes slowly. It often comes differently. It often comes silently. And that's what makes the waiting so difficult. You're standing still, doing the right thing, trying to hold on. And it feels like nothing is happening. You obey and yet your heart still aches. You pray but the silence seems louder after the amen. You wait but the door remains closed. And if we're honest, many of us come to that point and say, maybe God isn't moving at all. But I want you to hear this. The absence of visible movement does not mean the absence of divine activity. God does some of His most powerful work in ways we cannot see, in places we do not understand, and in timing we would never choose. Look at nature. Seeds don't sprout the second they touch soil. They rest beneath the surface, buried in darkness, hidden from view. But in that unseen place, a miracle is taking shape. Roots begin to form. Life begins to stir. It's not visible. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. And if you judged the process by what you could see, you'd walk away and miss the harvest. That's the temptation, isn't it? Assume that nothing is happening because nothing looks different. But waiting is not wasted. God's silence is not His absence. And delay does not mean denial. He is working in ways you cannot comprehend. His hands are steady even when yours are trembling. She didn't get what she expected. She didn't get it in the way she imagined or at the pace she prayed for. But she got exactly what God knew she needed, exactly when He knew she was ready to receive it. And that is a deeper kind of love, a more faithful kind of goodness. Not the goodness that gives us what we ask for the moment we ask, but the goodness that shapes us, refines us, deepens us so that when the blessing does come, we can carry it with maturity, humility, and gratitude. That's the work God was doing in her during that hour. Not just preparing the answer, but preparing her for the answer. So what changed? Everything, but not in an instant, not with lightning. It changed in layers, in whispers, in inches. It changed first inside her before it ever showed up around her. She found peace, not because the storm stopped, but because her eyes turned from the waves to the one who walks on water. She found strength, not because the burden lifted, but because she learned who was holding her under its weight. She found joy, not because she got what she wanted, but because she realized what she already had. God's presence, His promise, His faithfulness. And I wonder how often do we miss the miracle because we're measuring it by the wrong metric. We look for open doors, quick answers, sudden resolution, but God is cultivating something deeper. He's after the soil of our hearts. He's after the long work, the eternal work, and that kind of work takes time. You see, the real miracle in her story wasn't just what happened at the end of that hour. It was who she became while she waited. That's the miracle we overlook. That's the one we don't testify about nearly enough, because it's harder to describe. It doesn't photograph well, but it's the kind of change that heaven celebrates. God is not in a hurry. He's not pacing heaven, anxious about how long this is taking. He knows what he's doing, and if you'll trust him in the waiting, you'll begin to see that the delay is part of the design. The process is part of the promise. He's not just changing your situation. He's changing you. That woman didn't walk away the same. She waited, and in the waiting, her soul was strengthened, her vision cleared, her spirit calmed, and then yes, eventually things around her began to shift. The breakthrough came, but by then she had already received something greater than what she thought she was waiting for. She had found the beauty of becoming, and maybe that's what you need to hear tonight. Maybe the change you're praying for won't come in a flash of lightning or a burst of emotion. Maybe it's coming right now in the quiet, in the stillness, in the unseen work God is doing in your heart. Maybe he's already changing everything, just not in the way you expected. So don't walk away just because it doesn't look like you thought it would. Don't stop praying just because the heavens seem quiet. Don't stop trusting just because the results haven't arrived. If you wait with him, if you walk with him, if you stay when it would be easier to quit, you'll look back and say what she said. She didn't know it at the time, but in that 1 hour of waiting, something far more profound was taking place than she could have imagined. She thought she was just holding on a little longer. She thought she was enduring in silence, just trying to make it through another stretch of uncertainty. But in reality, the waiting was doing something to her. It was shaping her. It was forging. It was building her into the kind of person who could stand even when everything in her life seemed to be collapsing. That hour didn't just change her situation. It changed her. We don't like to talk about waiting as a gift. We don't like to hear that suffering has a purpose or that endurance has value. But there is a kind of strength, a kind of quiet dignity that only comes through waiting. Not waiting for waiting's sake. Not waiting because you have no other options. But waiting with faith. Waiting with hope. Waiting on God. She didn't walk into that hour strong. She wasn't radiant with joy. She didn't feel bold or courageous. She was tired, worn out, barely able to lift her head. But something remarkable happened as she, minute by minute, as she refused to walk away, something inside her began to change. Not quickly, not dramatically, but deeply. The waiting, you see, was refining her. It was stripping away the noise, the self-reliance, it was peeling back every layer that didn't belong so that what remained was something more solid, more honest, more real. That's what waiting does. It reveals what's true. It separates the temporary from the eternal. It shows you where your faith really rests. Anyone can believe when the answers come fast. Anyone can worship when the blessings flow. But the real test, the real proof, comes when the heavens are quiet and your soul is still choosing to trust. That's where character is formed. That's where spiritual maturity is born. Not in the victories, but in the valleys. She didn't come out of that hour with the same heart she had when she entered it. That's the beauty of the wait. It doesn't just test your faith, it transforms it. It turns hope into endurance. It turns prayer into persistence. It turns belief into something that can withstand the fire. And let me tell you something that our modern world desperately needs to hear. Strength is not built in comfort. It's not built in ease. It's not built in instant gratification. Real strength, unshakable, God-given strength, is built in the slow, steady pressure of perseverance. That kind of strength doesn't come from knowing all the answers. It comes from knowing where to run when you don't. Some of you are in the middle of that pressure right now. You're waiting, you're weary, and the temptation is to believe that nothing is happening, that you're just stuck. But I want you to know God is doing something in you right now. In the middle of this, He's not just working for you, He's working in you. He's building something eternal. You see, if the answer had come sooner, she might have missed the greater gift, because the blessing wasn't just on the other side of the wait. The blessing was in who she became during the wait. She became a woman who knew how to a woman who knew how to keep her eyes on God, even when every other light had gone out. A woman whose faith wasn't just something she talked about, it was something she lived. That's what happens in the waiting. God grows you into someone who's not swayed by every storm, someone who doesn't crumble at the first sign of delay, someone who can walk through fire with peace in your soul, because you've met God in the silence and you know He's enough. And that kind of strength, that kind of character, it doesn't fade, it doesn't vanish when life gets hard. It becomes a foundation you can stand on, a witness to others who are watching, wondering how you still have hope. There's something powerful about a person who has waited on God and come through refined. There's a beauty in the calm of someone who has trusted God with nothing but a promise. That kind of person changes the atmosphere around them. They don't panic, they don't waver, they don't demand, they rest because they know the one who holds time in His hands. That's who she became, and it wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was real, it was holy, and it was lasting. Maybe that's why God lets us wait. Not because He's cruel, not because He's distant, but because He's loving us in a deeper way than we understand. He's growing something in us that can't be rushed, something that trials can't steal, and circumstances can't shake. The strength He built in her during that hour would carry her through the rest of her life. It would become a testimony, not just of what God did for her, but of who God made her into. So don't resent the wait. Don't despise. Don't treat it like it's in the way of your story, because it might be the very thing that's preparing you to carry the rest of your story with grace, with courage, and with unshakable faith. She thought she was waiting for a moment, for a change, for a breakthrough, but what she found in that hour was far greater than what she expected. What she found was Him, and that changed everything. You see, the most powerful outcome of waiting on God isn't the thing we think we're waiting for. It's not the healed body, the restored relationship, the open door, or the clear answer. Those are good things, and sometimes He gives them, but they're not the greatest thing. The real treasure, the eternal reward, is God Himself. It is His presence. It is the discovery, often through pain and silence, that He is enough. We don't always realize how deeply we've tethered our hope to outcomes until God doesn't give us what we asked for right away. We think we're trusting in Him, but sometimes what we're really trusting in is a specific result. We pray, and in the back of our minds, we imagine how it will all unfold, how He will answer. But when it doesn't happen that way, we're left disoriented, confused, sometimes even angry. We say we've been let down. But what if He never intended to meet your expectations? What if He intended to exceed them? Not in quantity, but in quality. Not with more of the world, but with more of Himself. She began that hour, thinking she needed a solution. But somewhere in the middle of the waiting, something shifted. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't dramatic, but gradually, her gaze began to lift. She stopped staring at the clock. She stopped demanding answers. Her posture changed. She leaned in, not to the promise of a change in circumstances, but to the presence of the one who never changed. That's when the real breakthrough began. Because when God becomes your reward, when His nearness becomes your desire above all else, you've already won. You may still be waiting in the natural, but spiritually, you've crossed a threshold. You're no longer living from a place of lack. You're no longer driven by fear or control. You're resting, not because life is easy, but because He is with you. How many times in Scripture do we see this pattern? God takes His people through seasons of waiting, not to torture them, but to teach them what truly matters. Abraham waited years for a son, only to discover that the promise wasn't just about Isaac. It was about knowing the God who provides. Moses waited in the desert, not just to escape Pharaoh, but to encounter the presence of God in a burning bush. David waited to become king, but what marked him was not the crown, it was the closeness he cultivated with God in the caves and fields. What if that's what God is doing in your life? What if the delay isn't a detour but a what if He's allowing you to sit in the silence so you'll finally hear the whisper? What if He's closing every door, not to frustrate you, but to guide you into the one place where you'll see His face more clearly than ever before? She waited, and in the stillness, when all the noise of her expectations died down, she began to hear something deeper than her own voice. She began to hear the gentle reminder of His nearness, and suddenly, the thing she thought she needed so desperately didn't feel as, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined her peace. God doesn't just want to fix your life. He wants to fill it. He wants to be the one your heart turns to when the answers don't come. He wants to be your treasure, your portion, your strength, your song. And if it takes an hour or a lifetime of waiting for you to realize that, He will let you wait, not to punish you, but to awaken you. And when He becomes your reward, everything changes. You can endure longer than you thought possible. You can face uncertainty with confidence. You can weep, but not despair. You can suffer, but not be crushed. Because the very presence of God becomes your anchor, not just what He gives, but who He is. That's what happened to her. She came to that hour, expecting change. She left it having encountered God. And once you've truly encountered Him, you're never the same. Even if nothing outside you shifts, something inside you is different. You carry peace. You carry purpose. You carry the unmistakable aroma of someone who has been with Jesus. That's what people noticed about the disciples. Not their brilliance, not their resumes, but that they had been with Him. That's what will make the difference in your life too. Not how much you know, not how fast things turn around, but how deeply you've come to know the God who walks with you in the wait. So maybe you're sitting there tonight, still waiting, still asking, still hurting. I want you to hear this. Don't waste this hour. Don't rush through it. Don't despise it. God is in it. He is near, not just at the end when the prayer is answered, but here now in the stillness. And He is inviting you to stop seeking a result and start seeking Him. Because when you find Him in the waiting, you found everything.